Hello and welcome. This is Background Screening Tips and Tech with me, Tim Santoni, and my co-host, Joe Berlin. Today, we really have the pleasure of having a really awesome guest. Nick Fishman is joining us on the show. We really want to talk about the industry insights and perspectives that he has. Nick is, an Ohio native, went to The Ohio State University. He's worked and started up Employment Screen IQ, which was sold off to Sterling. He's running Fishman Group Consultants, and he's also now working with SJV as a chief marketing officer. We're really excited to hear his perspectives on the background screening industry and get into some banter. So, Joe, you worked for Employment Screen IQ, so I'll let you get in a couple two words about Nick before we get into the questions.
Now, that's probably going to be the toughest question I've had all, year.
Why am I scared to hear what your response is for these two things?
No. In all seriousness, I owe Nick and Jason, to a lesser degree, I'll just say that because he's not on the podcast right now, a ton. They taught me everything I know about the industry. They gave me a chance when they really didn't have to. They didn't know me. It was one interview. They brought me on to do some customer service in the client relations department. Within a few short months, I was handling some of the bigger accounts as they kind of taught me how to do things. The next thing I know, I was on the sales team and going to meetings with Nick. Went out to St. Louis a couple times. Favorite story I have, Nick said, "Hey, I'm going to go ahead and get, this is one of my first times traveling for sales." And Nick goes, "Hey, I'm going to get a car. You go ahead and pick it up and then meet me at the airport." And I said, "Okay." So I get there and they're like, "Oh, hey, I think it was like a minivan or something that he had like put on hold." And they didn't have it. And they go, "Well, what do you want?" And I was like, "I don't know. What else you have?" So I end up getting this bright red Camaro, like SS with like a supercharger in it, and just roll up to the airport and pick up Nick. And he's like, what are you driving? So that was one of my fun favorite stories of going to a sales meeting with Nick.
So that's funny. I don't even remember that story. That's hysterical.
I don't even remember the name of the company it was. I just remember when we got back. I don't think we won the account.
I do. I probably shouldn't name them. We did not.
Yeah, we didn't get the account. And Jason just gave us a hard time from then on out.
That's right. Yeah.
So there's a new policy: no renting red Camaros on any trip. Yeah. Just bad luck.
No, he passed there. He passed his little pledging at that point. I was very happy about that.
That's great. So again, I think that the purpose of this podcast is to share some industry insights, and Nick brings a ton of those. So, I think that the current trends are super important. So Nick, maybe just share from your perspective on the consulting side, the current trends that you're seeing a little bit in terms of the talent that's available and what's happening and where those people are landing and some opportunities that are out there from your viewpoint.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. And, before I get started here, just want to thank both of you guys for having me today. Joe, always great seeing you, and the feelings are mutual as far as how Jason and I felt about working with you over the years. Tim, congratulations on all the success that you guys are having over there. You guys are doing a great job for your customers. So anyways, going back to your question about talent. Jason and I, who also work together. I mean, you mentioned SJV and you mentioned Fishman Consulting Group. I'm also working with Jason through Morris Consulting Group as well. And we've done quite a bit of executive recruiting in the space over the last couple of years. What we have noticed since the pandemic onset is that a lot of companies cut not only people that probably needed to be cut, but they went beyond that and cut people, that were doing very good jobs. They just couldn't keep them on the payroll. And as a result, we've seen a lot of those people getting placed at a bunch of different companies across the industry, and very quickly, frankly, even in what seemed like a very big downturn within the market. So there are definitely some really good people out there, even now, that are looking for jobs, and we're finding that the market for them has been pretty competitive.
Interesting. That's great. Thanks for that insight. First question for you, Nick. You've been involved in the industry for a while, and I guess one of the questions that we have is, what philosophies have you seen with regard to HR, departments change in businesses over the last 10 years as it relates to background screening and their kind of views on what it's useful for, how it's used, and kind of brand and risk mitigation in those businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing over the last 10 years is that compliance is really a thing now, right? we used to talk about compliance 10, 15, 20 years ago, but you pretty much had to adhere to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the federal statute. And as long as you did that, you were okay. So, I would say that HR departments are no longer just checking the box, no longer just saying, oh, this background check is the same as this background check. I think that they're applying a number one, I need a higher quality background check because I want to be very careful about who I'm letting into my organization. And the other thing is there's just been a patchwork of legislation, both at the federal and the state level. There's also been a tidal wave of litigation happening in this matter. So I think that everybody, has seen this, whether firsthand or whether, through talking with others in the industry and their peers, and they've just realized that, I think compliance is the number one topic driving most of the background screening conversations these days.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that Joe and I see that a lot, which is, it used to be that, everyone would just kind of willy-nilly, I don't need to do authorizations and disclosures, and they don't care about, processes and procedures and notices. And until they get burned or they go through that process, they realize the importance of it. But I think that now it's not so much about the platform you're on, but what are they doing to help insulate and risk, or your software? What can you put in place to dynamically address all these changing things? And like I said, it used to be like once a year. Now it's like every month something's changing at the state, local, city, county, state. I mean, just to keep
it's
up
hard.
with it, it's crazy to keep up with, even in being people that are in the industry that have, really great resources and been doing it for a long time. It's nuts.
Well, I remember. Go ahead,
Nick,
to your point, right? I remember in the early days, we were so strict on our compliance. I remember, myself and a few of the other people in the sales department would roll our eyes, right? Oh, here comes more compliance from Nick and Jason and the powers that be. Like, now what do we got to do? And we felt like we were making customers jump through hoops at times, and it was frustrating. It's funny because the flip now is those are the first questions that companies are asking about. Do you have this in place? Do you have that in place? Do you have the, and what I have found is some of, not all of, but some of the smaller and mid-market companies, the CRAs, they don't have that yet. And they're starting to get on board, others are already there. And I feel like those are the companies that are kind of pushing ahead from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you. I think that, there are companies out there. It's not everybody is 100% on board with compliance. There are companies out there that, frankly, they're just checking a box. Somebody told them they have to do it, and they're doing it as inexpensively and as quickly as possible. And look, that's their prerogative. But there are certainly, I would say, a majority of employers that are wanting to do it the right way, and that are not just checking that box. And I think, those people have been talking forever about the fact that background screening is becoming a commodity, right? And it's hard to fight against that. But I would say that the compliance piece has helped this industry fight back against that a little bit.
That's a great point, right? There's a differentiating factor when you layer on the compliance piece of it. And I think that leads into the next question, which is, in your view, what trends or what issues scare you about the background screening industry? I think we could all say that litigation, right, and compliance is scary, but I think that's just inherent with any industry, that there's inherent risk, right? Whether you're in construction or you're in IT, there's risk. You could get hacked. There's, all these different things. You could do the wrong thing. Those are things that are enhanced when you're trying to negotiate and deal with multi-level of layer of legislation and laws. But what are some things maybe, Nick, that you see that are scaring you, that you think are around the bend that the industry will have to deal with, in the next 3 to 5 years?
No, it's fair. I mean, let's go back to that commoditization point. It's happening. I mean, it might be happening a little bit slower than we anticipated that it was going to happen, but the commoditization really concerns me for all background screeners, whether it is just in the buyer's mind that it is a commodity, or whether background screening companies are really racing just to get to the bottom where they can't cut, where they can't cut prices anymore. So that is definitely of concern to me. Beyond that issue, I think you talked about litigation, and I agree with you that will continue to be a thing. We talked about compliance. We won't belabor that point. something that's been bothering me in the industry for a while now has been kind of this stagnation of new ideas, stagnation of technology. Now, part of that is on the end user community. Within HR people generally aren't the first adopters of anything. But I think the mentality of doing things the way we've been doing them, because that's how we do them, whether it's coming from the CRAs or it's coming from the end users, I think everybody's got to get past that, because there are still a lot of efficiencies to be gained. There are still better data sources and better solutions out there. But somebody's got to be willing to put up their hand and say, look, I'm going to do this for the industry. And the end user has to say, we ought to take a serious look at these things. And that's, I think, what concerns me most about the industry right now.
Can I ask you a question on that, Nick? Just to kind of further that. Do you think do you think that's the sum of technology not being there when we talk about, going to get data and how they retrieve the data or how they report the data? Or do you think it's a matter of legislation or a combination of both technology and legislation as far as, or maybe I should say regulation rather than legislation, in order to kind of stop that from happening?
Yeah, it's a good question. Part of it is technology. I think unfortunately, Joe, I think the answer is it's all of the above. I think privacy is becoming a big thing, and certainly we don't want to trample as an industry on anybody's rights. But I think fear of violating privacy, fear of getting in the crosshairs of a regulator, in many ways is created a chilling effect on real advancements, solid advancements in the industry. I would, again, I don't want to see anybody's rights trampled, but I do think that we need to start thinking about different ways of doing things.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that to the degree the technology is there and available, if there's privacy restrictions at the public record level, the no technology can get through that. And so we fight against that, and we continue to fight against that. But I think that brings up a good point too. There's a lot of good providers out there. We happen to work with SJV Data Solutions as it relates to those different things. And I think that what you guys have looked at is looking at different ways of doing things in terms of monitoring both healthcare sanctions, and criminal monitoring, and all these different things in ways to manage things in a different way, which I think is a step in the right direction. And I'm sure that you're the 100% reason behind that, Nick. Joking, right?
Thank you for giving me the credit for that.
Right.
I'm not sure I even deserve a tenth of the credit for that, but it is, in all honesty, it's what I like most. It's why I've spent my time with SJV, is because I really believe in what they're doing. They are no longer just saying, hey, I can get you all of these different searches from all of these different places, but they're taking their time to figure out, great, I can get all of them for you, but here's the most efficient way. Here's a way to save you money. Here are some value add things that I can do so that it will require less manual labor on your behalf in order to delight your customers.
Right. And that impacts turnaround time, price, and it improves compliance at the end of the day because of those solutions. There's the technology solutions are there to really make sure the records being reported are accurate. I mean, for instance, on the healthcare sanctions, the verification stuff that you guys have implemented, which is hugely useful when you're talking about trying to re-credential groups of people in short periods of time, especially in this crisis we're in with regard to healthcare specifically, right? And compliance. And I think that in and of itself impacts both, not just HR departments, but safety and risk and insurance people, where those risks are exposed and maybe they aren't even aware of it, and they don't even see it as a background screening requirement. They see it as, segmented groups, and they don't even know where the overlap exists or where the gaps are. So, I mean, I credit you guys on that in terms of that's really the focus, not just data for data's sake, but how to use it, how to manage it, and how to make it more easily accessible in a way that's impactful to an organization, not just, like say, millions and millions of records.
And to do it with it. Of course, and to do it without the noise, like you were saying, with the millions and millions of records. I mean, you want to get all the information you can, but you don't want it to be distracting to what it is you were actually looking for. Sure.
And I think that like this industry, like any other industry, is about relationships, and you've probably been a master of those relationships over time. You've created a lot of relationships through the PBSA and through your relationships in the business and consulting with companies. When you're talking about working with HR professionals, we talk about them being process-based and tend to do things the way that they've always done them. what ways have you kind of been able to, uh, make your clients feel where you're more like a partner than you are a vendor to them?
Yeah, I think that is something we focused on very early on at Employee Screen IQ, and to this day, I think some of those ideals absolutely still exist in the market. It's the biggest thing is you want to earn your client's trust, and that's in any industry, right? But especially in this kind of an industry where you are highly regulated and you're dealing with a highly nuanced type of category, if you will, that your clients want to be reassured that they're working with the right people. So how do you do that? Number one, you perform every day as best as you possibly can. Number two, you become a trusted provider, and trust is a word that you throw out, but it's not only trusting them to do the right job, your provider to do the right job, but it's also trusting your provider when they don't do the right job, that they're willing to raise their hand and say, wait a second, because it is an inexact science. At some point, you're going to mess something up. And the question is, are you willing to be open and honest with your client to make sure that that doesn't happen and to mitigate any concerns when that happens? So I think that's one of the ways that you earn trust. The other thing is, and the thing that I think is, every bit as impactful as anything else that I've done, is I feel like the thought leadership is huge in being able to convey, number one, your company is an industry leader. Number two, you're an expert in this. And number three, you are really respected in your industry for kind of having a voice and having an opinion and pushing that agenda. And so, we've done it over the years through a variety of mediums. I mean, look, we're sitting here talking on a podcast right now. This is thought leadership. We've done webinars, we've done blogs, we've written white papers, we do interviews with the media, whatever we can to be out there and commenting on what's going on in the industry, I think really helps you establish that trust with your clients as well.
Yeah. And Nick, to that point, I have to recognize you and Jason for really, through this whole pandemic situation, really bonding together and providing some really valuable content to the industry, bringing on people that you guys have worked with and trusted professionals to really give some insight at all different levels, at the background screening level or CRA level, the data provider, the compliance side of it. And I think that those have been tremendously valuable. And I know they brought a lot of value to me and to our organization, but I'm sure that the industry as a whole has appreciated those and really appreciate that thought leadership from you and Jason. It really does take a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And I'll tell you, the other thing is, I think the other way that we're able to gain trust, and any of us are, is knowing what we know and being really good at what we know, and then finding people that know more than we do in certain areas and being willing to listen to them and being willing to share them with your audiences. So, over the years, we've gravitated to different people that we know the market trusts, whether that was Pam Devada from, the very beginning, or even her predecessor, Greg Davis, or even Angela Preston, who was our general counsel. But before that, she was a competitor and just a great industry friend. There are so many people out there that have a unique point of view, and it doesn't always have to be just about you. It's good to sometimes bring in other people that have other perspectives.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, I think that's the point of this podcast, that was really trying to illustrate, provide insight into the industry, provide tips. And we're bringing on people that people, we've interviewed competitors, and they're not really competitors. They're actually industry experts in what they know, right? Or people that can bring different perspective, because that's how people can evaluate the information, evaluate the content, evaluate the trust level, and make a decision that's best for their organization. And we all know we can't be something that we're not, right? You're not the expert in healthcare screening when you're not. You can't just say I'm the industry leader and put 35 years on your website when you're, a small mom and pop shop. People are smart enough nowadays to know that. And that's why I think that the goal of this podcast is kind of share those insights and perspectives. And so, Nick, before we let you go, any closing remarks? We'll definitely be able to link up all of Nick's information. Make sure we connect with him, whether that's over at SJV or through Fishman Group Consulting. Make sure that you have all of his information. If you have any questions that we didn't answer, we're happy to follow up with those after, if you leave them in the comments. But Joe, any final questions for Nick before we let him go? And then we'll let Nick kind of give some closing remarks.
No, I mean, other than where you got that great hairstyle. It's fantastic.
I learned everything I know from you, Joe.
Yeah,
I know I lost it faster.
We could change the podcast to the Bearded Guys podcast. I'm definitely the odd man out because I definitely have hair on my head and I'm not in Ohio. So I'll let you guys close it out and I'll just listen in.
Well, Tim, now I just feel like you're bragging, first of all, that you have hair. Just unfair. My closing remarks are, and I'll say this to anybody that asks, this is an incredible industry. The background screening industry it has a tremendous vision, a tremendous responsibility, and does so much for employers and their customers and their employees. And I have never been involved in an industry where people are able to band together, do things for the greater good, and really hold themselves accountable to protect people. And so, anywhere I go, I'm always happy to talk about that. I love talking with people that were my competitors and former competitors, that were my vendors, business partners, all kinds of things like that. There's just so much great here, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you for grooming Joe so that he could be a part of our organization. So that training has paid off and the tradition continues. Thank you for being such a valuable asset to the industry. And thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast. Again, if you like to listen to the podcast, you can download it wherever you get your podcasts. We also turn this into a vidcast and you can watch the Bearded Guys podcast on YouTube. Thanks so much for tuning in. And again, Nick, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everyone.